It's time for Johnny and the Professor. Common sense in senseless times.
I have not called for impeachment.
My greatest desire is to lead him right into impeachment. Impeach 45! Impeach 45!
So why did they play the Thelma and Louise and drive off a cliff here? One of two things. Either their base has gotten so nutty that this was the only thing they could do, or I think at least equally likely that the John Durham investigation is getting close to indictments of some very top people in the Obama Justice Department and Obama FBI and maybe in the Obama White House of what is the greatest political scandal in American history, the Obama administration spying on their political opponent in the 2016 election. And I think all of this is designed to try and provide an alternative narrative to try and pretend that didn't exist so we don't have to talk about it.
Oh yeah, it's very convenient, is it not? Because we had the testimony today of the Inspector General in the Senate. It was kind of overlooked.
That's what should be the story, and that's what the American people should be paying attention to, because that actually represented the greatest threat in terms of interference with our democracy. And all the rest of this stuff, look, the Democrats can try to make their case breezily as to the fact that the president, they allege, betrayed his country. If they really believe that, they should have charged him in an impeachment article with treason. And similarly, they can talk bribery and extortion and obstruction of justice all they want. They didn't charge any of those things. And the reason they didn't is because they couldn't prove it. These articles of impeachment are defective. They do not warrant a trial. And look in the Senate for an early motion to dismiss.
I have not called for impeachment.
My greatest desire is to lead him right into impeachment.
Johnny and the Professor.
Well, it's Johnny and the Professor.
Common sense for senseless times.
Where we talk politics, pop culture, and Pelosi.
Poor Wiley Pelosi. I know she's having a rough time right now.
No, why do you say that?
Well, because she's trapped herself into this impeachment nonsense. I mean, she had to follow along because of the more radical elements of her party. She knows now that it's not going to pass the Senate. It's doing harm to the Democrats now. Trump's numbers are going up. The people are looking at it and going, after all the nonsense and all the thunder and all the talk, you're talking what, in abuse of power and obstruction of Congress?
I could find more ways the Democrats have been guilty of those charges.
Obstruction of Congress. Congress is constantly obstructed. Congress needs an enema, is what Congress needs. It's always obstructed. Our guest today is Michael Knowles. Michael Knowles is a conservative political commentator. He has the Michael Knowles Show on the Daily Wire, and is a best-selling author for his 2017 book, Reasons to Vote for Democrats, A Comprehensive Guide, which, of course, is 266 pages that were all blank. So, welcome to our show, Michael.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you so much for plugging my magnum opus, the completely blank Reasons to Vote for Democrats. I don't know if it quite rises to the level of scholarship, but I think it definitely gets the point across.
It makes more sense than most of the Democratic policies.
You're right.
What would you like to talk about today?
Well, there's so much going on right now. I guess the most recent news that we've seen that really, I think, affects domestic politics is not even in the U.S. It's over in the U.K. with the election of Boris Johnson and that massive conservative win. It's the clearest political victory for a British PM since 2001, and it's the biggest conservative win over there since the Thatcher era, since the 1980s. And so what can we learn from that? What we can learn is not to trust the media. The media within the day or two before that election was telling everybody, look, it's looking very bad for Boris Johnson. He's hiding in a refrigerator because he doesn't want to answer questions. Maybe he'll get the plurality of seats, but he won't get a majority. Brexit isn't going to happen, right? They tell us all this stuff. And then you get the biggest conservative win in decades. Obviously, this sounds a little familiar to those of us in the U.S. who heard for months before the 2016 election, there's no way Trump would win. There's a Princeton survey, 99% chance Hillary is going to win. And then, of course, what happens? President Trump wins decisively in the Electoral College. I wonder if this is a preview of 2020 over here, and I wonder if it explains why the Democrats are so eager to impeach him. In the words of Democrat Representative Al Green, I think a lot of them fear that if they don't impeach this president, he's going to get reelected.
I'm concerned that if we don't impeach this president, he will get reelected.
And they have kind of missed the point. American people supposed to elect their politicians, their representatives? But apparently not if they're don't agree with the Democratic Party.
Well, of course. They have been telling us since before the 2016 election. They said that anyone who doesn't accept the results of an election is a threat to our democracy. That was almost a direct quote from Hillary Clinton. And then what happened? Of course, they lost the election, and they haven't accepted the results ever since. They are very selective of when they prefer to let the people govern themselves. You know, they think that they know better. There are self-appointed benevolent betters in Washington, D.C. They think they should tell us how to live. They think they should tell us how the government should work. They think that they can cancel and abolish constitutional rights willy-nilly. And they would prefer for the federal bureaucracy, which exists and endures long after the elected officials come and go, they would rather that extra-constitutional, anti-constitutional bureaucracy run our country instead of we the people ourselves. Actually, on the right even, or on the former right, Bill Kristol, once one of the leading conservative voices in America, now a very anti-Trump voice, he was pretty honest about this. I think he summed up the opponents of President Trump when he said in 2017, if I have to choose between the deep state and the Trump state, I choose the deep state. And obviously that's a great offense to self-government. But I think it's how the left is reacting and Trump's opponents generally are reacting, and we have to be very careful about that as 2020 approaches.
This is the media's issue. I've always thought about it, is that they don't seem to have an understanding of reality. There's reality, and then there's the reality that the media sees.
CEO of CNN said in our internal meeting, good job everybody covering the climate accords, but we're done with it, let's get back to Russia.
And I wonder, because the same thing happened, you were talking about, Boris Johnson, last year in Australia, you had a shift in the government also, and the conservative factors became the dominant part of Australia also. And again, we've had Italy and other nations like that. But the media always seems to miss this. Are they just insane and live in an alternate reality?
Yes, and you raise a very interesting point that we're seeing a kind of conservative resurgence, not just in the U.S., but in the UK, not just in the UK, but in Italy. All around the Western world, there seems to be simultaneous conservative resurgence at the very same time that the media all tell us that these notions of nationalism and sovereignty are dead, they're old, nobody wants it anymore. And so it's really split. You've got the people of all of these countries who believe one thing, and the media of all of those countries who believe something else. And I think part of it is because people who live in liberal bubbles, which is the entire mainstream media everywhere in the Western world, they have much more in common with one another than they feel they have in common with their own countrymen. And so it's a very isolated experience. I noticed this with the Republican support for Marco Rubio in 2016. Rubio's perfectly fine. I have no problem with Marco Rubio. But I was shocked when people in New York and D.C. and L.A. and San Francisco, if even Republicans would say, Rubio, he's our choice. He's the guy who's going to get us over the finish line. And then you look at what kind of popular support he had for the presidency, and it was minimal. I mean, it was barely any. You realize that the only people who liked Rubio were conservatives living in extraordinarily democratic areas. It was people who were surrounded by leftism. Even they couldn't break out of their own bubble. That's what we're seeing going on now, because there's an irony to the social media age. We think that we're more connected than ever, but really the opposite is true. We're so siloed in our own little echo chambers that we don't really understand what the other side is thinking, and that is nowhere truer than in the mainstream media, because they've abdicated their duty and their responsibilities as journalists.
As a student of history, as you can be in a library and have all the information at your fingertips, but if you don't know where to find it, then you're going to be ignorant. And it's amazing. We do have access to incredible amounts of information now, but it so amazes me that I have the same access to information that the media has, and some of these foolish people I listen to, the talking heads here and there. Why don't you just do some real, honest research, not just parrot each other's thoughts?
Right, because you can have all the information you want. You can be sitting in the center of the library, but the trouble is you actually have to read the books. I say this with true humility, because I am a student of history. I love history. I majored in history in college. And yet, even I, as much as I love it, am fairly historically ignorant, because much of the educational system in the elite universities in the U.S. has been hollowed out from within. And there's this really pernicious effect of having the entire sum total of human knowledge at your fingertips is you feel like you never have to learn it. So if you think that you can always Google a problem or you can always use a calculator to figure out some mathematical calculation, then you convince yourself that you don't actually have to teach that to yourself. You don't have to learn it, but of course you do. The way that we expand in knowledge is to actually read these history books, learn the dates, learn the people, find the connections within the history of our civilization. I think so often now the way that history is taught, you're just taught broad trends, which is to say leftist ideology. But of course you can't recognize patterns in history unless you learn the hard facts. And we're just a little bit lazy as a culture. And I promise you, because I know so many of them, nobody is lazier than members of the mainstream media. They would much rather regurgitate their own preconceived notions than actually look into the facts of any given matter. If you look at the impeachment, I mean, the impeachment is a perfect example because, especially if you're a student of history or a student of politics, there are actual facts that we have to analyze, right? The question, this most recent impeachment push, they've been trying to do it for 3 years, but at least the most recent one is, did President Trump commit a crime in his dealings with Ukraine? Did he try to bribe the president? Did he accept a bribe? Was he committing extortion? What was the crime that he committed? We know that he didn't do that because if he had done it, the Democrats would have charged him for it, and they didn't. The Democrats were contemplating 3 charges for impeachment: obstruction of Congress, abuse of power, and bribery, and they had to drop the bribery charge. So the actual substance of their impeachment is gone. Abuse of power is such a vague term, and they didn't even prove it. And obstruction of Congress, as far as I'm concerned, is the chief duty of the U.S. president. I think the co-equal branches of government exist in many ways to obstruct one another. So their actual charge goes away. Did the impeachment narrative go away? Absolutely not. Nancy Pelosi said her case was as strong as ever. Adam Schiff said it wasn't a failure at all. The mainstream media continue to parrot the narrative. I mean, what about Russia collusion? We were told President Trump committed a crime with Russia. He conspired with a hostile foreign government. We had a 2.5-year, $30 million investigation into this, and it turned out he was completely exonerated on the charges of conspiring with Russia. Has that changed anyone's opinion? Does that change anyone's coverage in the mainstream media? Absolutely not, because the left will stick to the narrative regardless of the facts. And I think the one advantage of this media deluge that we live in right now is that people are finally waking up to that. They're waking up to the fact that the man with the serious face and the jacket tie on the TV might not be telling the truth, and very often is not.
I wonder if we're going to have a situation, most people don't realize, I mean, John Tyler was also impeached. He was president, of course, before Andrew Johnson, I mean, you know, in the 1840s. But he was, an order of impeachment went against him on issues of states' rights, but the resolution failed. And I wonder if that's what we're going to have here.
I do think there will be some dissension. I suspect that there are some swing district Democrats who don't want to completely throw away their political futures. I mean, we now have 2 updated polls which show the majority of Americans oppose impeachment and removal. So I think that you'll get some, at least, who want to save their careers. But nevertheless, the country is so divided, and the opinions on Trump are so hard, and historical and philosophical knowledge of the American regime, specifically of the Constitution, is so weak, it's so low, that I think people just glaze over. They don't even really get what this impeachment's about, because really the charge is not bribery or treason or high crimes and misdemeanors. The charge is Orange Man bad, and people have already made their decision on that. I mean, when we talk about the precedents here, it's really important to look historically, even a century back, but I do think we're in sort of uncharted territory here, because at least with the previous impeachments, you had crimes that they were being accused of. I mean, you had great missteps, at least you could say, that these presidents were accused of. And with Trump, you don't have it. I mean, you really only have an impeachment in search of a crime, you know. Even in the case of the impeachment of President Johnson, you had this question of whether or not the president is able to fire the cabinet secretary without the approval of the Senate. Obviously he does, and that question was decided by the Supreme Court. But here, I mean, there's not even a serious question. What are they accusing Trump of having done with Ukraine or Russia or Stormy Daniels or the IRS? It's just vague insinuation of maladministration. which we know from the founding debates, our founding fathers and the framers of the Constitution rejected explicitly as a basis of impeachment. So I fear that, unlike past impeachments, we're really in lawless territory here, and half the country doesn't seem to care about it.
Which is of course a huge problem for us. But again, the Donald Trump has one advantage, that he has a good economy. I mean, the weird part, I've always thought, I'm always amazed by President Trump, because I didn't start out as a supporter of his candidacy. I mean, I first to look at Donald Trump and I just rolled my eyes like a lot of people did, I think. But honestly, I mean, you have a great economy, you have low unemployment, you have strong, China's at the table now negotiating an agreement that may actually limit them on intellectual property theft. I mean, who'd have thought any of this would have happened from Donald Trump? I mean, really?
Right. This is, evidence that the good Lord works in mysterious ways, because I think even conservatives going in who voted for President Trump because they thought, well, I'm not going to vote for Hillary. Even conservatives didn't think that he would get this much accomplished. I mean, I supported Ted Cruz in the primaries. I was very skeptical of Trump. I thought he had much more liberal leanings than he apparently does. And just about every day of his presidency has been a pleasant surprise. There's very little that I've objected to that he's done. There are some things, but they're relatively minor. You look at how great he's been on not just the economy, which has been going gangbusters, but on pro-life, on judges, which is hugely important, is going to outlast his presidency, on moral clarity overseas and our foreign dealings, on American sovereignty, even on trade. He's finally getting tough with people who have been unreliable trading partners. Like China is the great example, should never have been welcomed into the World Trade Organization, violates countless WTO treaties, steals our property, illegally subsidizes its steel and aluminum, makes us work with crony banks basically to impose fees on trade. And you've had people talking about it on both sides of the aisle for years. No one's been able to do anything. Trump has done it. I just think when you couple that with record low unemployment, specifically among ethnic minorities, you're in a situation where the Democrats have nothing. They're grasping at straws. We had a couple polls come out in the last few weeks, including one in particular, an Emerson poll, which showed that President Trump's support among black voters is 34.5%, and his support among Hispanic voters is 35 to 38%. Now, let's say that those are total outliers, even though we've now seen it a couple times. Let's say that his support is significantly lower, 25, 20, even 15. That would be such a dent into the Democrats' current electoral strategy. I think they're absolutely terrified. It's actually why I keep going back to that Al Green line. I think that if they don't remove him forcefully from office, they at least are convinced that he will be reelected.
And I agree. 2 weeks ago, we had our guest was Walter E. Williams, and we discussed this to some extent on air about the shifting in the especially the African American vote in the United States. And again, it is a terrifying aspect for them, because they've had 90 to 95% since the 1960s almost. So it is. What are you going to do if you don't have that vote? And again, so I guess that's why you have to get all the illegal aliens in you can and give them the vote as quickly as you can, I guess. But all you're going to end up is with California and New York again. And unfortunately, we live in Washington. The state of Washington will probably go too, unfortunately.
Well, they're obviously very afraid that despite their shenanigans, despite importing millions of future likely voters every single year, they're afraid it's still not enough to swing a presidential election, because all of those illegal aliens are going to states that they already win. So you're seeing this move now to overturn the Electoral College. Elizabeth Warren says that if she's elected, she will try to get rid of the Electoral College within her first term, which is a pretty funny pitch. She's basically saying, make sure that you elect me, and then I will undo the instrument that elected me because it's illegitimate. Doesn't seem to make a strong case for her presidency.
And also, she's entirely missing the point. There's only one way to get rid of the Electoral College is to amend the Constitution.
Right.
And you're not going to get, 2/3 of the states. I mean, Wyoming and Maine and all these small states are not going to agree to just say, let's just have California, New York, Florida, and Illinois and Texas elect everybody, and we'll just sit back in our easy chairs.
Of course. It speaks to a total misunderstanding of the country. I mean, we are the United States of America. We're not the United Individuals of America, and our framers did a great job setting up this federal system with checks and balances. I think this is part of the leftist strategy of getting civics education out of the classroom. There was a study out of ISI about 10 years ago. It showed that even at the most elite colleges in the country, and especially there actually, graduating seniors knew less about their own country and their own government than incoming freshmen. They were actually becoming more ignorant during their time in college and probably paying a couple $100,000 to do it. Now, what I think Elizabeth Warren is banking on is she knows she's not going to get any constitutional amendment to get rid of the Electoral College. So what she wants to do, I suspect, is what the whole left wants to do, which is go through the courts and use judges to rewrite the Constitution without us ever having to use the constitutional method of amendment, without us ever having to persuade our fellow citizens, just rewriting it from the bench. They've done it for a long time, and I suspect that'll be the strategy. And it's why, by the way, even for skeptical conservative, as I once was, it's very important to vote for the guy, I think, because just the judges alone, I mean, how many have we gotten on the bench under Trump so far? Something like 183. Those judges are going to be a real firewall. They're probably our best protection yet against the illegal and unconstitutional moves from the Democrats, and they're gearing up for it, so we have to be ready.
Do you think there are more conservatives in Hollywood than most people think? I mean, I was hearing recently talking about, I'm drawing a blank on his name, the idea that if you don't know someone's politics in Hollywood, then they're probably a Republican.
Yes, that is certainly true. I mean, I have the privilege of knowing probably most of the conservatives in Hollywood. You know, in terms of those who are willing to come out and show up to a bar night or something, there aren't too many of us, but there are a lot more who keep their mouths shut. There used to be a great organization which has since disbanded, called the Friends of Abe, and it alluded to the Friends of Abraham Lincoln, which is what we were, and it was a play on the old term you'd hear a century ago called Friends of Dorothy. It was when you were homosexual, and that was not socially acceptable, so you'd use this euphemism, he's a friend of Dorothy. Now, it's much harder in Hollywood to come out as a conservative than it is to come out as homosexual, so we have the Friends of Abe. There are many. I mean, I've been on sets, movie sets of plays, backstage, where everyone is ranting about their leftist politics. The people who are quiet are the ones who are conservatives. It's a real one-party town. I mean, I even know conservatives here who pretend to be liberals just so that they don't lose work. And that's because there are a lot of people in this town who have lost work for being conservatives.
I imagine that you have places to be, so I don't want to keep you longer than you need to.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm sure
I've been enjoying it. I've been enjoying the conversation.
Many more blank books not to write, so I'll be able to stare down at the stacks of paper and everything. But I've so enjoyed it. Thank you so much for inviting me on, I'll look forward to chatting again.
I was wondering, do you have any other last projects you want to talk about before we let you go? We generally like a little pitch in the end, if you
Yes, I actually am trying to write a book with words now, so we'll have some more on that in the coming months. And, of course, you can check out the Michael Knowles Show. That's on the Daily Wire, on Facebook and YouTube. And you can find me on Twitter at Michael J. Knowles. And there you can get information about our upcoming speaking tour on college campuses. And as long as the campus leftists don't tar and feather me, I'll be back again to do my show shortly.
You're listening to Johnny and the Professor. Politics.
This is actually what makes this whole thing so comical.
Pop culture.
This is something that they're going to be prioritizing, and that is diversity. Now, this is stupid.
Common sense in senseless times. This is Johnny and the Professor. Common sense in senseless times.
All of the people who are ascribed to this liberal, progressive ideology, the people at the pool who didn't like that you were reading my book, Deborah Messing, she's another Hollywood hypocrite. She wants to know who's attending a Trump fundraiser so that then they can let their producers know or directors know the people they don't want to work with. This is McCarthyism. We have free speech in this country. We are allowed to vote for whomever we want. But the hate is so intense, they have a plot to remake America, to shut down the right, to make sure that we can get as many legals coming in as 144,000 in 1 month. Give them a license and let them vote.
Contact the show at jpshowfm@gmail.com.
It's Johnny and the Professor, where we talk politics, pop culture, and Pelosi.
So, poor Nancy.
I solemnly and sadly open the debate on the impeachment.
Today is a solemn day in America, a day that none of us hoped for.
My greatest desire is to lead him right into impeachment.
It is with a solemn sense of duty that I rise today in support of impeachment.
A sad day for America. I'm not gleeful for today.
Impeach 45! Impeach 45!
Now, I keep hearing things like the radical left has taken over the party and she's just caving in. Any validity to those that rumor?
Rumors? I mean, you had, of course, the squad, and you've got these. I do think there's an opposition factor that rose up on the left after the election of Donald Trump. Because from what I understand, say, for example, Occasional Cortex, what's her real name? I'm drawing a blank on her name.
Ocasio-Cortez?
AOCs, yeah. Always. Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, you'll have to edit some of this. I think, for example, the AOC group and that, she literally had backing, I think, from factions that were strong on the left trying to...
Now, was that the group where that group of gals where Trump said, if you don't like it here, go back to your own country, and they're all of a sudden, no, you're a racist because you said that? Was it that group?
Yeah, that was the group. That's it's Tlaib and Cortez.
The one who married her brother?
Yeah.
The gal that married her brother?
Yeah, and, so that those four ladies were the one. They're an aspect of it, I think, that we're seeing. But I think it's more of a general of there's been a push. When Trump was elected, I think a lot of the people on the extreme left were just so outraged by it. Again, this insanity we see today, the ones that I can't accept it, he's not legitimate, I can't accept it, they keep going. That's been a loud voice. It's almost like it's like a Twitter crowd version of the Democrats. I don't think it's a majority of the Democrats that feel that way, but it's the squeaky wheel thing. They're making a lot of noise, and they'll campaign against you. This is the idea that if you don't want to, if you vote for not impeaching Donald Trump, then you better expect the extreme left people are going to get whatever money they can to run people against you because they want you to all be in lockstep with them.
And I recently found out that if you removed California, then Trump won the popular vote and the electoral vote, and it was just the difference was just California.
By the way, something very few people know, the popular vote was won by Hillary Clinton. However, almost all of that margin was in the state of California. If you take California vote out of it, the other 49 states, Donald Trump won the popular vote as well as the electoral vote.
I live in Washington. If 51% of Washingtons vote for a Democrat, then all of the electoral votes in Washington go for the Democrat. And it's about 58%, the way it was last time with Trump. If you take California's vote, it was about 2.5 million, so you only need about 500,000 from New York. And New York did the same thing. They vote more for Democratic candidates, which is the argument in favor of the Electoral College, because if not, then you're just saying, okay, New York and California pretty much get to decide who gets to be president. Mm-hmm. And you're going to always end up with the same leftist wacko that those states are going to put out.
Well, I don't know. Everybody's moving out of those states because they're so crappy now because of the leftist policy that's running those states into the ground. Everybody's, 695,000 people moved out of California last year alone.
Oh, here we are. California is about to create hordes of new homeless people sleeping in tents and pooping in grocery stores needing handouts. AB 5, that's the heartless bill. It is going to gut the gig economy. Goes into effect in 2 weeks, and freelancers are hosed. There was a time in this country when we celebrated the hustle. The more you worked, the more opportunities you had to show off your bitchin' skills and carve your own path. But now, California hates the groove. I see how it is. The bill was meant to shore up shortcomings in ride-sharing and delivery services. Think Uber and Postmates. But now these companies are going to tank the flexibility their employees love in the name of fairness, and it will have disastrous effects on a number of industries. Lyft will need 300,000 fewer drivers in order to be in compliance with the new law, and I hate that word. It is a freedom-killing, soul-sucking, fascist word that smacks of unintended consequences and heartless liberty violations. And that means the product is going to suck because the quality will go down with 1/10 of the people doing the work. The liberal jesters at Vox once championed the law with a headline, "Gig workers win in California is a victory for workers everywhere." Except for the newly unemployed, who are now, by definition, not working at all. 95% of Lyft drivers say schedule flexibility is extremely important or very important. Alas, they'll be forced to work a set amount of hours with fewer drivers and higher prices. Thanks, Gavin Newsom. Hope you're proud of yourself. You'll never be president. I'll never vote for you. Hack. I guess we'll all go back to stinky taxis and hope we get where we're going with no rating accountability, so medallion owners get a return on their investment after buying shady, fake do-gooder politicians. And we can grab our own food and go back to reading encyclopedias or stone tablets. Progressive politicians can't let well enough alone. As soon as they see something working, they obsessively work to break it. Consequences be damned. Damn you, fuss budgets.
And they moved here to Grays Harbor.
Well, all of them are in Grays Harbor. The population went up by a factor of 10 times. Yeah.
Right.
They also go to the Midwest and places like that. And the weird part they find when they live there, if you've ever lived in rural areas, and I have, the people are very nice there. I mean, we're the big metropolis of Grays Harbor at 19,000 people. I mean, what Aberdeen has. I mean, it's still a small town, and generally speaking, people are decent folks in this city. And in rural areas, you find out you don't find a bunch of, we don't want your kind around here. And then,
right.
That's the myth that's constructed by Hollywood and perpetuated by this corrupt media.
But I can smell the Trump support.
Yeah, that one, boy. I remember that one was one that tells you a lot about it. And of course, we're all deplorables.
There's no bias.
Yeah, there's no bias.
No bias at all.
So you hadn't interviewed anyone. You're investigating this alleged Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. You're the lead investigator. You originated the investigation. You're the point of contact. You drafted the document. And here you are before you've interviewed a single solitary witness saying F Trump. Then that same day, your colleague, Lisa Page, wrote, "Maybe you're meant to protect the country from that menace." And you responded, "I can protect the country at many levels." We're not even a week into an investigation that you originated, approved, were the contact for. You hadn't interviewed a single solitary soul until August 11th, and you're already promising to protect the country from that menace, Donald Trump. And then on August the 8th, you still hadn't interviewed anyone. You're 8 days into your Russian collusion with the Trump campaign investigation, and you got another text from your colleague, Lisa Page. "Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right?" And you replied, "No, he's not. We'll stop it."
Yeah, bias in the media is one of the worst four-letter words. It's the only four-letter word you can legitimately say on air, and it's actually dirtier than most of the others, is bias.
Jeff Zucker, president of CNN, has a personal vendetta against Trump.
Over 90% of the news regarding Trump in the first 100 days of his administration was negative.
You notice, every time we ask questions to Republicans, it's always a little tougher than when we do to the Democrats.
Bogus narrative that was largely fanned and hyped by an irresponsible press.
We're moving towards impeachment.
He's known Trump for a long time. They worked together back during The Apprentice.
And hates his guts.
Let's just stay very focused on impeachment.
Let's start with the fact that Washington Democrats made up their minds to impeach President Trump since before he was even inaugurated.
Impeach 45! Impeach 45!
I have not called for impeachment.
Here's a reporter in April of 2016. Donald Trump isn't even the Republican nominee yet, but impeachment is already on the lips of pundits, newspaper editorials, constitutional scholars, and even a few members of Congress. April 2016. On Inauguration Day, 2017, the headline in the Washington Post, "The campaign to impeach President Trump has begun." That was day one. In April 2017, 3 months into the presidency, a senior House Democrat said, "I'm going to fight every day until he's impeached."
My greatest desire is to lead him right into impeachment.
That was 3 months into the administration. In December 2017, 2 years ago, Congressman Jerry Nadler was openly campaigning to be the ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee, specifically because he was an expert on impeachment. That's the Nadler's campaign to be the top Democrat on judiciary. This week wasn't even the first time House Democrats have introduced articles of impeachment. It was actually the 7th time. They started less than 6 months after the president was sworn in. They tried to impeach President Trump for being impolite to the press, for being mean to professional athletes, for changing President Obama's policy on transgender people in the military. All of these things were high crimes and misdemeanors, according to Democrats. Now, this wasn't just a few people. Scores of Democrats voted to move forward with impeachment on 3 of those prior occasions. So let's be clear. The House's vote yesterday was not some neutral judgment that Democrats came to with great reluctance. It was the predetermined end of a partisan crusade that began before President Trump was even nominated, let alone sworn in. For the very first time in modern history, we've seen a political faction in Congress promise from the moment a president election ended, they would find some way to overturn it. A few months ago, Democrats' 3-year-long impeachment in search of articles found its way to the subject of Ukraine.
It's crazy. I feel sorry, though, for Nancy in some ways because, I mean, she's in San Francisco, and you don't get more lefty than San Francisco.
Right, and look at that place.
Yeah, living in her walled mansion while she has people crapping on the streets of her city. Mm-hmm. You know, it used to be, there was an old TV series, The Streets of San Francisco, and now I guess it'd be The Sewers of San Francisco. And that was just a shame because I've been, in the past, I've been to San Francisco when it was a beautiful city. And it is a beautiful city, but now it's a beautiful city covered in crap. And guess what? Seattle's falling in its footsteps.
Hey, and we're working on it here. Just give us some time. We'll get there.
We get enough crazy leftists. But again, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Even in Washington, for example, if minorities in Washington are shifting at the level that we've been seeing in some national polls recently amongst Hispanics and amongst Black Americans, is Washington even going to definitely go for a leftist this time? Could Trump win in Washington? I mean, do you think? I know he'll win in Grays Harbor.
Well, according to the press, that he's going to lose everything.
Well, yeah, of course. Then Hillary, and by the press's predictions, Hillary Clinton is president of the United States, and that's their whole point is. But we predicted and we said it, so therefore it must be true. Well, guess what? It ain't so. So, I mean, that's a weird thing. A lot of those states, I wonder if that's a big problem the Democrats are really afraid of at this point, that is, if their voter base is being eroded amongst the minorities, are they going to be able to win in a lot of the states they've won in the past? How many closet conservatives are going to come out and say, okay, I'm going to vote against this now. I'm going to vote for a more conservative government because we've got a great economy and great things happening in this country right now.
They're going to get him out. They're going to remove him.
They have again, they can impeach him, which of course is impeaching is like the district attorney filing charges against you. Then the trial actually happens in the Senate, and good old cocaine Mitch McConnell has already established that it ain't going to happen. I mean, it can't. They need 67 votes, and they can't possibly get 67 votes to impeach Trump in the Senate. He would have to walk in there and shoot Pelosi or something, or to get them to vote on it. I mean, it would be...
Well, he could just get Biden to do it, because since Biden was vice president and you can't look at him at all for anything, he could do that and get away with it. Because you can't pursue him, you can't investigate him.
It's weird. You can't mention that Joe Biden did a quid pro quo and held back money to save his son's bacon, but Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian agent.
Right.
And are grooming her to be the third-party candidate. She's a favorite of the Russians.
Who's the one taking money from these countries? Who's the one getting advantages from former Soviet nations?
A Ukrainian politician named Sergei Lyshenko and the head of the anti-corruption unit, a man named Artem Sintek, had illegally leaked the so-called black ledgers that showed the payments from a pro-Russian Ukrainian party to Paul Manafort to the Clinton campaign. In light of this, was the president wrong to have a skeptical view about potential Ukrainian interference in the 2016 election and to ask for their assistance to get to the bottom of what actually happened?
Or from China as a communist nation? That seems to be the Biden family.
I noticed, Joe, China's not the enemy. They're our friend.
Joe's friend is money. is all it is. He's just a greedy politician. And I feel sorry for Joe Biden in a lot of ways. In the past, he was never that bright, and time has not been good to him. I mean, he's beginning to sound like, I keep expecting him to, start ranting about get off my lawn, you crazy kids. I mean, he's beginning to sound like a villain out of Scooby-Doo or something now, I'd have got away with it if it wasn't for that pesky Trump. Anyway, I don't understand the Democrats right now. I don't understand how you can do it. And the weird part about it is that, again, it's all put forth in this media idea. I was listening to Stuart Varney, who's on Fox Business, and I like Stuart Varney. I did a piece he's talking about the differences between what the media sees as the world and what the world actually is.
Jeff Zucker, president of CNN, has a personal vendetta against Trump and hates his guts.
And that was very interesting how the media portrays it. He's talking about, theirs is just a systematic, constant attack on Trump. Mm-hmm. And it's, that they look out of control.
11 human beings are slaughtered as they're praying at a temple, and they want to talk about Trump.
Even though they know the impeachment is going nowhere, they still have to hold on to it. And
kind of like Russia.
That's what it is. It's Russia, Russia, Russia. It was Russia, and it was recession.
CEO of CNN said in our internal meeting, good job, everybody, covering the climate accords, but we're done with it. Let's get back to Russia.
And racism was what they tried. And then all of a sudden, the recession never came.
Right.
The economy's we literally have more jobs available, trained jobs available than people to fill them now. Functionally, in a way, our unemployment can be almost considered zero if you take it in that way. There is more people out saying if you would get some training, we would hire you for jobs. So much for your recession. Russia didn't Mueller say no connections, no charges?
Right.
The whole Mueller report?
They ignore that part, though.
Yeah, but it's ignore it. And then, we've talked about, racism. Like I said, if Donald Trump's a racist, he's really bad at it because he's, pro the Hispanic community, pro black community. He's actually doing things in the areas where the Democrats have destroyed cities and trying to make them better. He's actually first time we've had any sort of criminal defense reform under his presidency. It's just like...
No bias.
But it is. It's just the way it is. I don't understand how they can look on it and be so different, how two people can look at the same thing and just see it in 100% entirely different. I mean, I honestly do think that they must be crazy.
Many, if not most, of the very high-profile, widely publicized hate crime incidents that over the past 4 or 5 years we've seen constantly in the media. So Jussie Smollett, absolutely confident calling that a hoax. A week before that, Covington Catholic, where the original claim was that these prep school athletes had attacked and almost brutalized an elderly Native American man. Yasmin Saweed, the claim that Trump supporters ripped at her hijab. Eastern Michigan, a racialist graffiti targeting black students. Air Force Academy, where a literal general had to travel to campus to put down what initially looked like racial frictions. Grand Rapids, the young black girl pre-college who claimed that boorish white men literally urinated on her. Kean College, that's the death threats delivered to black students on a college campus. Wisconsin Parkside, that's the one with the nooses. The burnt black church in Mississippi. University of Virginia, where the claim was that the fraternities were running these sort of story of O-style anti-feminist rape rings. All of those turned out to be fake, along with roughly 500 other cases.
So some 500 fake hate crimes in 5 years?
They're wanting crazy people to roam the streets like free butterflies.
Only if they vote for Democrats. If the homeless voted Republican, they would get them off the streets immediately. I mean, if illegal immigrants came over and were voting for Trump, they would be wanting to build a 500-foot wall on the border.
Right.
I mean, it's what it comes down to. It's only as long as it's the voter ID laws. I mean, the same sort of idea. Oh, you can't have voter ID laws. I can tell you that if your voter IDs got you more Democratic votes, they'd be out going door to door, getting people, taking them to the DMV.
Right.
It's the hypocrisy of it is amazing, and I honestly do think it's psychopath, but the Trump derangement syndrome. When you literally live in a situation where you're so frightened, angry, or such a high emotional state all the time, it actually affects your brain chemistry. And I think we've had 3 years of people live in a hybrid state of hatred of Trump to the point that I think they've actually are not able to make rational decisions.
Oh, but he's spreading hate.
And they always say that. And I go, other than if you attack Donald Trump directly, he'll smack you right in the nose. But I've never heard Donald Trump go after anybody that hasn't attacked you. I mean, am I wrong? Can you think of one? I don't think of any occasion that Trump hasn't let somebody have it who hasn't came after him.
Who didn't start it, right?
Right. I mean, it's the old don't start the fight, but finish the fight.
Okay, what about the 13-year-old girl who thinks she knows what climate change is?
Greta, poor Greta. I feel really sorry for her, too, because...
He's bullying her because she was named Time Magazine's Person of the Year or whatever.
Person of the Year, Minor of the Year. It's really sad because I look at her life and go, I know she has some actual issues because apparently she does have...
she has something. We all have something.
Well, I mean, but she actually has, slightly autistic or something. It's part of her frustration. And I know that... I wonder if her parents are just not kind of abusing her and carrying on her coattails.
Right.
Because, I mean, come on, she doesn't know what she's talking about. If you all the climate change nonsense, if you want to argue me about climate change, the first thing you have to explain to me is why it was hotter in the Middle Ages than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Why it was hotter during the Roman period than it is now. I mean, and then we had a cooling period called the Little Ice Age after the medieval period, and now we're on a warming period, which is modern time from about 1850 on, is what they've been measuring it. If you can tell me why it was hotter during the Middle Ages when we had less carbon fuels and all this stuff going on there,
right,
and no cars, and why it's hotter then than it is now, then I'll start listening to you about climate change. And two, then just shut up and realize you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Whoa, toxic.
I'm sorry, and I'm trying to...
You're such a bully.
Yeah, well, I'm not a bully, but I'm an anti-bully. I don't... It's the people that are talking about climate change that are saying you can't say anything against it or you're going to be totally destroyed in your lives. That's bullying.
Right.
I've never liked bullies. My answer for a bully is to punch them in the nose.
Or the neck.
Well, it depends on, there are other strategic areas, but we won't get into that. So
Star Wars, there's rumors.
Well, we can talk about the rumors.
There's all sorts of rumors that people are going to hate it now. More people have more attachment to the Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian
than anything. I wouldn't be surprised about that. So wrapping all this up, if you want to contact us, of course, you go to our email, which is jpshow at, let me do that again, jpshowfm@gmail.com. Or you can find us on YouTube by doing a search for Johnny and the Professor. Put it in quotes and you'll find us. I've posted our last interview already, and there will be one after the show. I generally get them the day after for that to listen to our old shows. And of course, I write for the Senior Sunset Times.
You're listening to Johnny and the Professor. Politics.
This is actually what makes this whole thing so comical.
Pop culture.
This is something that they're going to be prioritizing, and that is diversity. Now, this is stupid.
Common sense in senseless times.